Good day everyone, I am Eliza Marie C. Alande of Y1PMG03 Naphtali, and I will be discussing the articles 1296, 1297, and 1298 of the Law on Obligations and Contracts. First, let's talk about the Article 1296. Under the Article 1296, it is said that when the principal obligation is extinguished in consequence of a novation, accessory obligations may subsist only insofar as they may benefit third persons who did not give their consent. The Article 1296 follows the general rule that the extinguishment of the principal obligation carries with it that of the accessory obligations. It provides, however, an exception in the case of an accessory obligation created in favor of a third person, which remains in force unless said third person gives his consent to the novation. This is so because a person should not be prejudiced by the act of another without his consent. Take a look at this given example. Mina owes Sana 1 million pesos with interest at 12%. Sana owes Dayon 120,000 pesos. In the given example, it was agreed among the parties that Mina would pay the interest of 120,000 pesos to Dayon. In this case, besides the principal obligation of Mina, there is a stipulation in favor of Dayon, a third person. Later on, Mina and Sana executed another contract whereby they agreed that Mina would deliver to Sana a title of a dance studio in payment of the loan. In spite of the novation, the accessory obligation to pay the interest of 120,000 pesos to Dayon still subsists unless Dayon gives her consent to the novation. And now, let's talk about the second article that I will be discussing, which is the Article 1297. Under the Article 1297, it is said that if the new obligation is void, the original one shall subsist, unless the parties intended that the former relation should be extinguished in any event. The Article 1297 stresses one of the essential requirements of a novation, to wit, the new obligation must be valid. The general rule is that there is no novation if the new obligation is void, and therefore the original one shall subsist for the reason that the second obligation being inexistent, it cannot extinguish or modify the first. To the rule is accepted the case where the parties intended that the old obligation should be extinguished in any event. If the new obligation is only voidable, novation can take place, but the moment it is annulled, the novation must be considered as not having taken place, and the original one can be enforced unless the intention of the parties is otherwise. And now let's talk about the last article that I will be discussing, which is the Article 1298. Under the Article 1298, it is said that the novation is void if the original obligation was void, except when annulment may be claimed only by the debtor or when ratification validates acts which are voidable. The Article 1298 has its basis only on the requisites of a valid novation. A void obligation cannot be novated because there is nothing to novate. However, if the original obligation is only voidable, remember that a voidable obligation is valid until it is annulled in court, or if the voidable obligation is validated by ratification, the novation is valid. Take a look at this given example. Sam agreed to deliver prohibited drugs to Blake. Later on, it was agreed that Sam would pay Blake 200,000 pesos instead of delivering the prohibited drugs. The explanation in this given example is that the novation is void because the original obligation is void. Take a look at this second example. Suppose Sam was induced through fraud committed by Blake to sign a contract whereby Sam obliged himself to deliver a specific car to Blake. Subsequently, it was agreed between Sam and Blake that Sam would give Blake 200,000 pesos instead of the specific car. The explanation in this given example is that the original obligation of Sam is voidable. As it has not yet been annulled at the instance of Sam, the second contract is valid. In the same example, if Sam subsequently confirmed his obligation to deliver the specific car and the right of Blake. The explanation thereto, his ratification cleanses the contract from all its defects and makes it valid, and therefore, the novation is also valid. That's it for my report. I hope that you learned something. Thank you and God bless.